No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And welcome to this week's Thoughtful Thursday. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at Hacking Your Leadership and leave us a review on iTunes. On this Thoughtful Thursday, I want to talk about an article I saw on LinkedIn that's kind of touching on something that we've spoken about probably 3 or 4 times over the years on this show. And this is the concept of how LinkedIn puts it, the all-consuming boss. The boss that sends you text messages or emails or some type of communication at all hours of the day, weekends, holidays, whatever it is. And whenever I see stuff like this, I think, okay, first of all, the pendulum is moving when it comes to what is acceptable versus not acceptable. Who is considered the righteous one in the relationship versus the one who's not righteous in the relationship, and that's constantly moving. But right now, it's on the employee. The employee has the kind of the collective minds of the public out there. The sympathy of those people will fall on the employee, not on the boss at this point in time. And that could change, but as of right now, that's where we are. What do you think about this, about the all-consuming boss and being reached out to at all hours of the day?
First of all, I'm just grateful that I haven't had that in like decades and decades, which is nice because I've been there. And I've dealt with that and I've seen what that looks like. I think that I think 2 things off the bat. Number one, that there are businesses and there are industries where urgency is something that is a consistent thing. And there are jobs where, you need to immediately reply to something. And then there's the times when like you may have an urgent thing every once in a while. But like I think of like emergency services, doctors, right? Like I think of nurses, like I think of people
who
like
are actually saving lives.
Yes, where it's like I need to take an action right now on this thing. I think most other things outside of that don't require that level of immediate urgency. There will be some things sometimes. There's the safety of teams. There's things that can happen. Like don't get me wrong. Like there are definitely moments when that level of urgency is required. But most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's a question, it's a follow-up, it's a request, it's something that does not have to happen at that exact moment, at the exact time. And I think that leaders, and to your point, like leaders this day and age are learning quickly that you have to be smarter with how you think about that type of communication. And now that you have different softwares and different things that you can use where you can limit access, you can have do not disturb on for certain times of the day. Like if you're trying to be efficient and effective, then I think you have to be conscious of what does that look like in the space in which you work and how are you using the proper tools at the proper time to get the responses that you need. I think of like, if I get a text message from a boss, then like, that's probably something that's urgent or at least needs my attention in the very, very near future versus an email versus so you just kind of get that. But I just think that it's becoming to your point, an expectation of the workforce that these things are considered.
Right. And so the reason why you think that though, is because you don't get text messages from your boss 3 times a day. Right? You get emails from your boss 3 times a day, 4 times a day. The text message, if it only comes through once every, 3 times a year, that probably means that the relationship between you and your boss is healthy enough where he or she understands that when something is urgent and I really need to get a hold of Lorenzo, I'm going to send him a text message. But my kind of litmus test or my criteria for what is urgent will be shared by Lorenzo. We both agree on what is considered urgent versus what is not. This is where a boss becomes all-consuming versus not. Does your opinion on what is urgent match your boss's opinion on what is urgent? If it does match, then that boss isn't all-consuming. That boss is doing the job they should be doing. And if you are overwhelmed by that, but yet you still believe that what they're doing is urgent, is actually factually urgent, then you either you're in the wrong line of work, or you need to kind of like develop a thick skin to this. Like, this is the kind of thing that you have to do if this is the industry that you're in, whatever that is. I don't know any ER doctors who get the pager and every time and go, oh, again, like, it probably happens every once in a while, but they know that was the job they got into when they got into it. It's not like it changed on them. It's how it's always been. But the key to having a healthy relationship here is not about how much communication is done through what mediums and how often. It's about, do you and your boss agree on what that right amount is? Because there are some people I know who would take a personal offense if they even received an email on a Friday at 7 p.m. or on a Sunday afternoon, whereas other people that I know of kind of think, well, as long as they don't have the expectation of responding, then they can send an email to me whenever they want to. We spoke about how France passed laws preventing bosses from sending emails outside of business hours because they didn't believe that a lot of workers actually had the ability to say no to that or to push back. And so they kind of stepped in for them. The number of emails that I've received over the last year with the little signature line that says, I've sent this email when it was convenient for me. Please don't feel the need to respond until it's convenient for you. The first time I saw that was more than a year ago, and I thought it was really weird when I saw it. Now I get it at least once a day. I get an email with that signature line in it. So it's moving towards this era of, I'm going to work when I want to work, right? And if if you have a hybrid environment or a work from home environment, then it's important that you are able to work when you want to work. But that doesn't mean it's convenient for other people. And as long as the relationship is there where you have the communication that says, hey, don't come down on me for sending the email on Sunday morning when you're with your family. I don't expect you to respond. And sometimes you have to have the conversation verbally in person or over the phone or a video call to make sure that's clear. Sometimes that email signature line that says respond when it's convenient, that's becoming so used that it's becoming cliche, and people will put it all the time and then actually expect a response immediately anyway, even though they have that signature line. So what I want to ask you, Lorenzo, is how do you deal with sending emails, text messages, communication to people who report to you without necessarily knowing up front what they consider to be appropriate, or whether they have the ability or feel they have the ability to push back on you if they don't want to respond right then and there? So I want to ask you that, but first I want to get up to word from one of our sponsors. All right, Lorenzo, how do you thread that needle? How do you make sure that you can reach out to your people when you want to or when it's convenient for you without having to think about, can I do it now or do I have to schedule it for later? While also making sure that you are not becoming the all-consuming boss in the minds of some of your people?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think what I've learned over time is to kind of tell them that up front, especially when it comes to like email and text message, is like, hey, this is how I operate. This is kind of when I'm up and moving. This is my expectation of myself when it comes to being accessible to all of you. But I also, if I need something urgently, I will just call you. Like if the phone rings and it's me and I haven't said like, hey, do you have time for a call? Then it's probably something that is in the moment and is needed. But especially with emails, there's always kind of the intent of like when people forward emails to you, is like, what do you want me to do with this? Right. And so like I've had conversations say like, hey, I'm just going to forward you stuff that I think is good to context to have or good information that I want you to have or whatever. But like, I'm not asking you to respond or have to like unless I need something, I will say that in the email, is what I'm looking for. But a lot of times I'm just going to forward you things that are, again, just for you to have visibility on or have context in. When it comes to text messages and whatnot, many times I will send a message of just like, hey, good morning. Are you in today? Or most of the time I kind of know what schedules are. Good morning. Let me know when you have a chance to connect. Give me a call when you are free. Hey, quick question about this. And if I need something by a time, I will say like, hey, quick question about this. Need to have this by 3 p.m. today. Like I put that in the initial message with clarity of what's going on. So I do my absolute best to do that. But there's been many times when I've had conversations about that. Where someone's like, hey, you sent this text the other day and I wasn't sure. I'm like, let's talk through that, right? Let me be clear about my expectation and making sure that this is kind of how I operate. But at the same time, I want you to know text message is my personal kind of preference when it comes to communication. It's the way that I can get back with you the fastest. If you call me and I can't answer, I will normally respond in a text, in a meeting, in this, like what's going on. So like just know that that's kind of how I like to operate. And I pride myself on being available. So like if something pops up, I really want to be available. And I think that when you start to set that type of a rule set, those calls or those text messages that maybe at an inconvenient time become less and less.
Right. I also want to say too, is in that I've been in many roles where I had people reporting to me and I had a boss. And it's interesting how I kind of put myself in these situations and think about, priding myself on being available. I don't pride myself on being available to my boss, but I pride myself on being available to my people. Mm-hmm. And so if I received a text message from my boss or an email from my boss or something when it was not an urgent thing, but it was sent to me at a time when nobody's working, 9 p.m. on a Friday night or Sunday morning or whatever it is, it came from my boss. There was a part of me that might think, that's weird. And I would intentionally not respond. Like even if I could respond, there are times when I've intentionally not responded because I don't want to set the precedent that that's okay. I don't want to set the precedent that to validate the action by my boss by saying that I am reachable at this time. But I also am not going to tell my boss, don't do that, because I want my boss to feel like they can work how they want to work when they want to work. As long as they're not expecting me to meet them where they are, then I'm perfectly fine with that. On the flip side, if one of my employees reached out to me, there would be a part of me that would be really frustrated with myself if I didn't see it for an hour and then responded. It took an hour to respond back because I really try to pride myself on being available to my employees whenever I can. And so it's incredible how this dichotomy of you want to be available, but you don't want to be taken advantage of. And I think that's kind of the norm when it comes to people. You want to be a good leader, but you don't want to be taken advantage of by your leader. And if everybody's communicating up front about what the expectations are, I don't think you can go wrong. But again, it takes that constant communication. You can't just assume that just because you do things a certain way that your people are going to appreciate it.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And have a great day.